Good afternoon. My name is Alex Graham. I used to run a TV production company called Wall to Wall for my sins, and now I just do fun stuff like this. I've been doing these masterclasses, chairing masterclasses for the last few years now, and what is really wonderful is that the opportunity to sit and spend some quality time with people at the top of their profession. We're going to talk about editing. Now, I know I'm going to offend some people, but I do think that, camera is important, sound is important, script, everything is important in television and film. But in my humble opinion, the editing suite is where it all comes together. And when people used to come and ask me about getting into television or getting into film, I said, the best thing you could possibly do is beg, borrow, blag your way into an edit suite with a really good editor, because you will learn almost everything there is just by being in the edit suite. You understand story, you understand, and it's not a surprise that some of the greatest film directors started out as editors, because that's where it all comes together. And we have two people here who are supreme practitioners of this craft. Ben Stark has worked mainly in documentaries, high-end international documentaries for television and for cinema. He's had a host of nominations, Emmys, BAFTAs, Griersons, and in 2013 won the Sundance World Documentary Editor Award for his work on The Summit. Thank you. Next to him, and I'm really nervous here because I've been practicing her name all morning, in spite of the fact my wife is called Maeve. I never quite got around the Gaelic, but anyway, this is Una Ni Dhonghaile. And Una has worked in both documentary and drama. I'm hoping that one of the things we might get to explore a bit in the next hour or so is the differences, obviously, between those two forms, but also, perhaps more interestingly, the kind of similarities that exist. Una has won again, a host of awards, and been nominated. Actually, we're going to see three of her films, three of her productions today, all of which have been nominated for BAFTAs. So I suppose, can we just start by again, I'd just like to get a sense, before we go to the first clip, what made you want to be an editor? Did you always want to be an editor? Did you kind of stumble into it?
No, I didn't always want to be an editor. I had a moment of realization at some point in my teens when I watched a film and saw all the names at the end that these are actually made and people make them. They don't just happen. Then I got interested in theatre, I got interested in story and all of this kind of stuff. And pretty much what you said, I was interested in making films. I did a bit of directing, a bit of writing, a bit of shooting, a bit of everything, and discovered that for me, all of the things that I'm interested in happen in a cutting room. And I was lucky and got and blagged my way into the opportunity to sit in those rooms with some incredibly talented people and realized it was almost magical. And then when I went out and tried to do directing after that, it was always a little bit flat compared to...
It's also much colder, isn't it, when you're out there directing?
It's much
much like being in a nice warm cutting room.
Yeah, you got to have a huge, huge, huge passion as a director to push a film. In the case of documentaries, with the documentaries that I do, often for years. You've got to be so dedicated to it. And in truth, I'm not sure that I am that dedicated to a single thing.
But also the relationship between director and editor is a really interesting one. I think hopefully we might get a chance to talk about that. How did you end
Stumble in?
Yeah.
Well, sort of like Ben, I grew up in a family without any sort of media contacts, but brilliant oral storytellers. My dad tells the best bedtime stories, very real and visceral. So when I was 14, I think my brother came home from college and just told me that there was a new media course opened up in Dublin. And I studied directing and cinematography for 4 years first, straight out of school. And then from there, I was always the person relegated to edit the group films because no one else wanted to do it. And then I heard about the National Film and Television School and I applied and specialised in film editing because, again, it gave me the opportunity. If I had chosen, at that time I was 22 and I was thinking of directing, but if I had chosen directing for the National, you could only direct one film a year. Whereas if you chose editing, you could edit documentaries, animations, dramas. And at 22, I just thought I wanted to do everything. So having gone there and discovered the power of editing, I just never looked back.
Okay, brilliant. So what we're going to do, as I say, both Ben and Una have worked in both genres, you know, documentary and drama. But for the purposes of today, and to keep it simple, Ben's our documentary editor for today, you know, and Una's our drama editor. So we're going to start with Una. We're going to start with a television series which some of you may have seen, BBC One series that went out last year called The Missing, written by Harry and Jack Williams, directed by Tom Shanklin. And I think what we're going to, with Una and the drama, I'm interested in exploring, one of the things we want to do, certainly with the first couple of clips, is kind of look at the relationship between what ends up on the screen and the script. Because, you know, obviously with drama, everything begins with the script. I mean, this also happens, I mean, in some cases, there are documentaries which also begin with the script. But in drama, there is nothing there unless you have a script. The script is everything. But at the same time, it isn't always everything, as I think we'll see. So can we run the Missing clip just to set this up? Those of you who haven't seen it. So this tells the story of it's a very powerful, emotional story about where a child, a couple lose their child while on holiday, and it explores the kind of impact of this terrible. And we're going to see the moment. We're going to see the moment when the child goes missing. So can we run the clip, please?
Ollie? Ollie, you in there? Oh? Ollie? 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 You seen little boy? Little boy about this size? Is he running up there now? Ollie? Ollie? Ollie! 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 Oh.
Right, that's got us off to a really intense
Grim
start.
start.
Can we just put up, just before I ask Una about this, can we put the script, a couple of pages of the script from the missing? I just want to, before we talk, I just want to point out to you. So this is this is the writer, and you'll see basically our clip starts on the left-hand page, 36A, open air swimming pool bar, dusk, and we have 36A, which is actually almost a whole page on the script. And then we have 3 scenes, 37, 38, 39, which is basically the rest of the scene that you've just seen. And, as you probably spotted, the screen time, 37 to 39, actually take up quite a lot more screen time than 36A, although 36A actually takes up more on the page, So I suppose I want to let's start with that. I mean, what you have here is 36A, if you read it here, is actually what you see on the screen is pretty much what you've got on the page. I mean, it's pretty faithful, almost down to kind of word for word. Zidane runs up, crosses to Henry, who volleys into the goal. It's all there. The crowd grow wild. But then 37, 38, and 39, you're not unfaithful. I mean, what's there is kind of more or less what we see. But so can you just talk a bit about how you? And what I'm interested in is when you're in the edit.
Yeah.
So you've got the rushes, obviously, and you're kind of walking through. You've been through all them. Have you got the script? And are you kind of and is the script still important to you as an editor?
Yes, yeah. So when the rushes first come in, Jack and Harry Williams wrote The Missing. As you can see, they did a most beautiful job of writing. So the script was very rich with what they wanted to achieve. And here, as you said, we're very faithful to it. So once the rushes came in, I actually cut what was written there. And we discovered that actually by cutting the sound too quickly, it just didn't sustain the sound. By cutting out the sound, really at the moment that the boy went missing, it all became unreal. And it was better to just continue with the father's search.
So you did initially cut it.
I did, yeah. I don't.
Yes, for those of you, I don't know if you can see this there, but if you look at what he says at the end of, or what they say at the end of 36A, the sound fades till it's utterly quiet, like the TV is on mute. Tony screams for Oliver, but as his world collapses around him, no one even notices. And then 37, 38, 39 all say silent. But what you're saying, but if you I don't know if you noticed in the cut, actually, when he goes outside, you can still hear. I mean, you knock it back but you can still hear quite clearly. The crowd are still cheering. The game is still going on.
Correct. So what we discovered, what the guys were trying to achieve, quite rightly, is, as you said, you picked up on that line. His world collapses and no one even notices. So that moment of if you lose your child and suddenly the blood is rushing in your ears and you can't find them. But we did find that actually the ordinariness of losing your child, you can't see your child, but you begin to think, it's okay, he's gone to the bathroom. So we wanted in the cutting room. So once we did this cut, we realized it became unreal too quickly. And then you didn't identify with the father as much, possibly. Also, Tom Shankland had shot beautiful footage, which once it was silent, it meant that we maybe skipped through the footage too quickly as well. And we wanted, that fluorescent tube light hum in the bathroom as he's opening those doors. So I think with the writers and Tom, our overall concept of The Missing, because The Missing was unusual, that Tom Shankland directed all 8. And so I assembled all 8 of the present tense from February until April. And then another editor, Fiona Colbeck, joined us, and Danny Palmer, once we did the past tense. So having from February until April, just myself and Tom and the writers and Willow, it meant that we really got a good run at the film. And one of the key things we wanted was the ordinariness of this horrible situation and that the life continuing. And then the little high-pitched note, I think, just added, I know we were speaking about Come and See earlier, but when I watched it, I actually remembered, if anyone has seen The World of Apu, the Sajeed Ray film, there's a most beautiful sequence when the father comes home from market and he has presents for his daughter, and he doesn't know while he was away that the daughter died. So you follow the father as he walks down, almost in real time, a bit like what we try and do sometimes in The Missing, that it's actual real time, not multiple cameras. And you just hear this little goat bell, and as he arrives down, the mother, his wife's back is to him, and he begins to take out all the presents to show what he's brought. And you don't see the mother's face, and then you cut to the foreground and you see the mother's face as she opens her mouth, and then they cut the sound. But this sound that does come is this Indian instrument, and it's like a scream, but it's an actual, I don't know which instrument it is, if anyone knows it, but it actually just fills the whole.
And this kind of feels like the craziness.
It feels like horrific, exactly.
The craziness in his head, doesn't
correct,
it?
yeah,
like
yeah.
It's kind of, this is like the pressure.
This is just it, yeah, exactly. So then I was looking for a high-pitched sound to try out, and then when I showed it to the director and the writers, they loved it, and we kept it. But so that sort of came.
But you also do a couple of interesting things visually as well. You kind of, you cut back and forward from the kind of very big wide shot to a kind of quite tight sort of steady cam shot, you know. And then at the end you have a kind of series of almost.
I know,
you have a series of jump cuts, don't you?
Yeah, a series of jump cuts.
Which kind of just kind of makes it feel more and more. So I mean, again, is that something that, I mean, in terms of your relationship with the director, are you with something like the exteriors of that sequence? Would you sit on your own in the cutting room and kind of assemble that, and then kind of show it to the director?
Correct.
And then you'd play with it together. I mean, just can you talk about that?
Yeah, something like that. So say I would cut it, and myself and Tom, because we'd worked together before on the later clip show, we had decided that sort of psychological editing, so that you could really go to these vast wides, and again, the nothingness of this huge wide where you can see, like we the audience, we're looking for the boy too, and he's not there, and you just see the father running, and then to cut faster to the closer as he's trying to find, we're really trying to get that psychological feel, so you're in the subjective point of view of the father,
Okay, brilliant. We could talk about this all afternoon, but we haven't got all afternoon, sadly. So we're going to move on to Ben's first film. Now, this is a documentary. This was nominated for a BAFTA, I think, this year, or was it? This is Tsunami.
This year, yeah.
So can you just talk a little, just before we get into the clip? Can you just talk a little bit? So this was looking back to the tsunami in Thailand through the eyes of families who'd been involved there. Do you want to just explain the kind of idea behind the film?
It was with the director Ursula Macfarlane for ITV, and I met with Ursula, and both of us were interested in trying to make a film not really about the tsunami, not really about the destruction of the tsunami, trying to make it about how amazing we as people are, that something as random, as indiscriminate, as vastly destructive as the tsunami can hit, and 10 years on, where we might find ourselves, for better or worse, with that if you were caught up in the middle of it, or if your loved ones were caught up in the middle of it. So that was the edge that we were dancing, as it were. We know the tsunami happened. We've seen there are lots of films about the horrors of it. There aren't so many films about how amazing we are as a species and our ability to survive and move on and maybe try to find a logic in a random moment.
Okay.
What have you. That's what we were interested in.
Should we look at the film? Let's look at the clip. So let's look at the tsunami clip, please. Thank you.
A 2-hour ferry ride from Phuket lies the island of Phi Phi.
We'd had 4 terrific days. We'd done our bit on Phi Phi, and now we were moving on to really, I suppose, what was going to be like the wind down before we had to get back onto, the normality of work. On the Christmas day, Piers and I had gone for a walk, and we'd been able to say some really honest things to one another, actually. He said he was really proud of what I was doing because I'd become me, and I was, doing the things that I loved, and I loved him, and I was very proud of him. Whilst we were incredibly close, we didn't often say those sorts of things. I'm not a big sayer of I love you, particularly to Piers, because he's a big brother. But we said them on that day.
Further up the coast from Phuket is the resort of Khao Lak, one of the most pristine stretches of beach in southern Thailand.
I was on holiday with Tom, my partner, and his mum and dad, Carol and Colin, which was amazing, absolutely wonderful. The beach itself, beautiful, absolutely lovely. And Tom being a great swimmer, just, you know, he just loves being out in the ocean. Christmas night, something to eat, really nice, really sort of low-key, loads of families sitting there eating. Yeah, it's a really good atmosphere. Our plan after the holiday was to go home and get on with doing this wonderful home up that we've just purchased, to get that. Keep moving forward, make a home, make a family.
The following morning, at 7:58 a.m., 300 miles away, a huge earthquake struck under the Indian Ocean. Waves of up to 10 meters high, traveling at speeds of up to 500 miles an hour, were heading for the west coast of Thailand.
I remember that film really well. So I suppose, I mean, what I'm interested in here is that, you know, obviously, I mean, this is just a clip from the film, but, you know, there is no tsunami here. We haven't seen, you know, and I mean, I think it was Hitchcock who said, you know, suspense is waiting for the expected, you know, and so can you just talk a little bit about how you and Ursula thought about, you know, crafting the narrative in that way? I mean, sort of in kind of, because I guess, I mean, I don't want to sound crass here, but I guess, you know, an editor thinks, oh, great, a film about a tsunami, you know, like, you know, kind of lots of really horrible sort of archive visuals I can play with here. But so, I mean,
we came from the opposite place.
Right, okay.
Our internal private brief to ourselves was how little can we show to get as much as possible. Yeah. You have something in a film called Boxing Day Tsunami. We all know there's a tsunami. It's going to happen. It has happened. It's going to be part of the film. So that's not really the interesting bit. It's everything on either side of it that's interesting and that we really wanted to explore, from the mundane details of having a nice supper and so on, which become incredibly loaded and poignant, and the thing that you carry through the rest of your life because of what they ended up being the Last Supper. So we were very interested. It's interesting, this crossover of drama and documentary, because we set out to make an intensely human, very emotional, dramatic telling of that day and of the subsequent, with as little time as possible spent in the actual day itself and on the actual event. I don't know if that really answers your question.
No, it does. And I think that what's interesting is, of course, you know, I mean, your point about, I mean, the fact is, we come to this film, as you say, we all know there's going to be a tsunami. We don't need to kind of, you know, we don't need to remind people, well, you know, and actually it's almost because, I mean, as you say, I mean, the stories become poignant. Actually, what's interesting is they're poignant from the beginning, because although we don't know the details of what's going to happen necessarily, you know, that sense of foreboding is there in that very first interview. You know,
well, arguably that's there when the title comes.
Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, we don't normally say these things to one another, but that day we did, and you kind of just know where this is. Yeah, you know where this is going. But on the other hand, of course, the critical thing is, Una is dealing, you know, with in the missing. Jimmy Nesbitt, you know, is a brilliant actor playing a part. He's playing a character, and of course, we want to make the audience feel that he's not good. We want to make them feel that he's real. But you are dealing with real people. You know, you're dealing with real people, real lives, real tragedies, and so how does that affect your relationship with the material? I mean,
hugely. You have a responsibility to the subject matter and the contributors. I would say above and beyond the people that are paying for the film, because it's their lives and they're trusting you with it. And with someone like Ursula and many of the directors I work with, they develop incredibly close relationships with these people, and these people confide in a way which is phenomenal. And then you, as the editor, of course, are completely privy to hours of someone's innermost thinking and feelings on a subject, and you have to be respectful of that. But part of being respectful of that is trying to be true to the subject and true to those people. And one of the things that is, I think, a great success in that film was all of the characterizations, the portraits, which they almost end up being of those, of the, I can't remember, 4 or 5 different contributors, are incredibly true to who they really are, both their strengths and their weaknesses. And the editing process of something like that, I think, is almost more about omission than what goes in. It's about what you don't put in and how little you put in. And that little line of, we said we loved each other, I don't normally say that to my brother, says everything. But there's loads of other stuff which was about the day, which is not as giving.
That's a very interesting thought. I mean, and I imagine this is also, I mean, that idea that, you know, you construct by omission as much as, I mean, and that's probably true of drama as well, isn't it? I mean, there are moments when the best decision an editor can make is not to cut.
Correct,
you know,
yeah, or not
say,
to show.
And, you know, actually, again, going back to the missing, I mean, there are some, I mean, what's interesting is early in that exterior sequence, you're letting, I mean, there are some quite long, you know, so steady cam shots, you know, and kind of, you know, so that where you're not, I mean, actually, you know, there's, I mean, it then you start to cut a bit more. It's the pace of the editing increases, which is, you know, part of the building the tension. But
we also have the same thing, for instance, when the child is missing, and over the next, say, 8 episodes, if the mother was crying too much, we found very soon after Tom started directing that actually, as you said, not showing her face, you know, going to the back of her head or her profile was infinitely more poignant than to see her cry. And that, and our little, whatever frame that Ula, the DOP, and Tom found, that the drama and the integrity of the emotion, even though it is a drama, a fiction, that there was a truthfulness in a shot that wasn't necessarily a big close-up of tears. It was actually something else. It was her hair with her cheek or something.
There was very subtle omission in the clip we saw of one man's panic, and then you cut to a calm wide, and everything is carrying on. And that is a huge amount of the editing process, is working out what you need, what you don't need, what you want.
Good. We're going to have to move on, because I'm keen to try and keep a bit of time at the end for, I'm sure you're all saving your questions up. We're going back to drama now, back to Una. Now this is, again, I want to do a bit of a compare and contrast. This is another interesting example of the relationship between the final product and the script. In this case, an even more dramatic example, I think. So this is a series which, how many series have there been of Ripple Street?
Well, there's actually been, I think they're doing their 4th and 5th at the moment for Amazon.
So this first launched on BBC One. I'm sure, I'd be amazed if you haven't all seen this at some point. Ripple Street, BBC One, started in 2012, directed by Tom Shankland, who also directed The Missing, as it happened, written by Richard Wallow. Starring Matthew McFadyen. It's, you know, it's London's East End. And what we're going to see here is essentially the pre-title for the opening episodes. Established. So this is the very beginning pre-title sequence establishing the series. Watch carefully, and then we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to go back and look at what was actually on the page for the pre-title, and we'll see if we can spot any differences. Let's roll the clip, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Whitechapel. Be sure to look down as keenly as you look up. Mr. Gladstone himself only last week found himself fitted for new boots. Follow me for the haunts of Jack the Ripper.
Your shit, Spade.
Our men in blue, still cloaked in ignorance of Jack.
Yeah, darling. For a bit of company.
Miller's Court. 5 months past the scene of the worst. Worst, and please God, the last. Mary Jane Kelly. What that man Jack did to her, well, we shall not say.
Was Tracy all right? Where'd you find him?
I looked, it wasn't hard. Finest whores. Flesh is what you think, there's no shortage in these parts.
Falls when he's bid.
Money's right, he'll give you his mother and his sister too.
I likes it.
All in his parish, no little else but thuggery. How best to raise them up from such iniquity? Well, that's a matter for you, good people of God. That shit buggery. Murder! Murder!
Inspector, I must see him.
Show yourself in there, dressed like that, I know he's blue.
Younger than less, do it out!
Let me!
This better be very good. They found a tart, sir. Up on Foregate. She's been ripped, Inspector.
Can we just put the repertory script up here? We've only show a couple of pages of this, but I think you can see this is the opening sequence, and basically you've got the tour guide taking the toffs around, and in fact, as we go on, what you see is that there is I think it's fair to say that in the original script, there's a brief visit to the boxing.
No, not at
no,
all.
Not at all.
No.
Okay.
The pre-title just follows the tour guide and the little boy actually who pickpockets.
Right. So we have the tour guide.
And the boy brings the.
So the boxing sequence
was post-title.
And Matthew McFadden is
post-title.
There's the boxing Matthew McFadden. None of that is anywhere to be seen in the pre-title.
Yeah, correct.
So you get it back. So just talk us through. So you get it back into the cutting room.
Yeah. So
and you've got the script.
Yeah.
You know, and writer's taken a lot of trouble on the script, written it. You know, he's sweated blood. It's probably.
And you can see actually in Richard's writing, he wrote in the most beautiful, really alive way. So very early on, we knew that.
But you get it into the cutting room, and so what happens? You cut it. You cut the script. You look at it.
Yeah.
And then
actually, it was brilliant. It actually did work brilliantly. But when we finished the film, so it works brilliantly. I cut the scene as per script during the shoot. And when the shoot is finished and I've begun to build the whole episode, when we watched it back, it was very clear to see that it took too long to meet the lead characters of a brand new series. So Jerome and Matthew, we just didn't get to them. And it was really the executive producer, I think Richard, who sort of came into the cut room and said to myself and Tom, why don't we just throw it up in the air and see what happens? And then Tom said, sounds good, give it a go, Una. And they left and closed the door, which is a very lonely place for any editor to find themselves going, oh my good God. So then we just, I went through it. I think that was a Wednesday, and they came back on the Friday to just see how it worked. And it was very much, I'm sure as Ben knows, sometimes when you're working in a strict time frame, you're also cutting in a very visceral way, and it was just getting the best shots and trying to find the best. But I did have both scenes cut in their own integrity, and then it was just trying to find
So everyone understands. So the boxing sequence,
and
the kind of the kind of illegal boxing sequence.
Yeah.
That's kind of how far down the film originally in the script.
So after the title, it came to the boy running through the streets to say there's a dead body. Right. So within 2 minutes, say, of the title.
But in
the scheme of the film, it was like 4 minutes or 5 minutes into the film after the titles.
Right.
So then it was just a sort of an intercutting of throw up. I think this is where editors, where we do have a huge skill, is to have a very good memory, first of all, and keep a cool head, and think in terms of visuals. So it was very easy, once I got started, to actually do a very visual cut, like what Ben is saying. If I knew it was a big close-up of the tour guide, then going back into the wider of the boxing ring, immediately there's a dramatic tension that happens with the juxtaposition of those two types of shots. And then, quite funnily, I mean, you can see in here some of our frames. The shortest one was 10 frames. So affectionately, I have called Tom 10 frames for Ripper Street and 1,000 frames for The Missing. But it was just to try and get that story. And I think, again, as an editor, the challenge really was how to cut so fast, cover so much, so many locations, so many characters, and keep, hopefully, the audience interested, gunning for the characters, and not lost.
Yeah, because it's kind of slightly nerdy person I am, when I first watched the clip, when you sent me the clip originally, I lost count at around about 100 edits, I think. But more importantly, I actually set out to try and count the number of setups that were there, which is, and I lost count at about 50 or 60 setups. So this is a massively complicated. So when you took those two discrete sequences and glued them together, did you scribble something on a piece of paper, or did you just do it? No,
I just did it visually. Yeah, just trying to work. So really, like when they went out and closed the door, the first thing you have to do is just have a cup of tea, and then just sort of begin at the beginning. Just think, okay,
and
all my best shots.
How long did it take you to craft that then?
I only had so they left, say, on the Wednesday evening, so I only had Thursday and Friday morning to pull it together. But having achieved it, sometimes your first cuts are really interesting and really good. So once we had achieved it, it pretty much stayed. I mean, there was a couple of little things that we finessed. We got it down to 3 minutes. I think my first cut might have been 4 minutes. And then they wanted a 3-minute pre-title. They didn't want too big of a pre-title. So then we just, but then Tom was back in the room with me where we went through and watched it and worked. And I should say Dominic Shearer did the music, who did the music on The Missing.
Right.
So that was a great input as well, because then we had collaboration.
We might come back and talk a bit more about that, but I am conscious that I don't want to. We've got quite a few clips to get through, so we're going to go back to Ben now. This is the Rolling Stones, everybody, and I think we should just. We should just show the clip, and then we can, and then maybe this time let's just show the clip, and then we can kind of deconstruct
the Rolling Stones.
What it is. It's the Rolling Stones, it's Exile on Main Street, one of the great albums ever made. Let's just run the clip.
The Rolling Stones at the time, it's not a 5-piece band anymore. It is a 8-piece band with the horns, Jim Price, Bobby Keys, with Nicky Hopkins. And all those people, they have kids. And it's like the Rolling Stones, it's like a tribe, During the night, all those musicians and technicians. During the day, all those kids. So it's impossible to separate the family life from the professional activity downstairs. The tribes goes bigger and bigger and bigger.
Running.
Yeah, which amps are you coming out of, Keith?
Now he asked.
That Fender, the big Fender
Talk about a dance that's going around, where everybody doing it from the grown-ups down. You don't move your head, don't move your hands, you don't move your lips, just shake your hips.
The basement of Keith's house was, in fact, a lot of separate rooms that that made up a basement. And in the end, the separation was so poor that we would have to have the piano in one room, an acoustic guitar in the kitchen, because it had tile and so it had a nice ring. There was another room for the horns, and there was one probably main studio where the drums were, and Keith's amp. And Bill would stand in there, but his amp would be out the hall.
Okay, so let's just give us a bit of background. So how do you end up making a documentary about the Rolling Stones? How does this happen?
This happened because of another film that I've made, The Falling Man.
Which we're going to see a little bit
of. Which had been seen by the director, who is an LA-based director, Stephen Kayak, and the producer of the film, John Badsek, Passion Pictures. And I got called in for a meeting, and they asked me if I was a Stones fan, and I said no. And then they talked a bit about the film and the notion of it, and I got the gig.
And what was the gig? This is all found footage, archive of one kind of art, isn't it?
At the start of the edit, I had a pile literally about that high of transcripts of audio-only interviews gathered from the last 40 years from books, radios, everything that was around this few years of the Stones' life. We also had the offcuts from a band film called Cocksucker Blues by an Austrian photographer director called Robert Frank. And we also had, at that point, a very small handful of photographs by this photographer, Dominic Tyler, who happened to be with the Stones through this time and had a very secretive collection of photos at the time. And the task was, as Mick put it when he came in, it's the decade I remember least, and we don't want to look old. It wants to be immersive, and of us as we were young, and of the feeling of the time, not talking heads talking about things.
So what do you just we haven't got a huge amount of time, but so you've got this pile of material. So what's the first thing? You just watch everything? You listen to everything?
God, no. Well, I mean,
so
how do you
begin to kind of wrestle this thing to the ground?
Trying to understand the differences in perspective within the band was a point of clear something to get a bit of grip against. One person saying it was wonderful, the other person saying it was the worst time of my life. I love it, I hate it, all that kind of stuff is very useful. Trying to find ways to humanize people that have become icons and almost cliches, or perhaps actual cliches, but humanize them, which is trying to use the little bits of chatter around, again, it's looking around the edges.
Yeah.
It's like I get Mick far more with now he asks than I do from an hour of sitting watching Mick talking about Mick. And then trying to sort of immerse yourself in the feeling of the time. Robert Frank's offcuts were a blessing because they literally were the Stones have a huge warehouse full of everything that they've ever had anything to do with, and there were a number of tins of film that hadn't been looked at since 1971 that were literally the offcuts from the film cutting room glued together. And you just start going through them and finding moments that spoke of the time or spoke of the character. And it's a total tapestry. I mean, it's an editor's dream and nightmare simultaneously.
Yeah.
Really
I mean, it's interesting just watching that clip that we've seen, because there are almost like three little sections within that. There's a kind of the opening sequence, where he's talking about it, talking about as a tribe, as a kind of family, and kind of that feels quite loose and quite kind of home movie sort of kind of feel to it, and then the music kicks in, and then you've got that little bridge section, which is actually kind of I suspect was quite fun to cut.
Oh, it's all
kind
good.
of, you know,
It was a
yeah.
fantastic film.
But then you kind of get it, and then the final bit is actually kind of almost quite journalistic, which is kind of starting to unpack how the album got made, and sort of, you know, so each there's kind of, you have kind of different styles of kind of cutting that kind of, you know.
Well, not intentionally, but you very quickly learn and discover by jumping in that if something's too frenetic when you're trying to make a point that actually people want to get, and you want it to land, and you want people to sit with that thought, being frenetic rarely pulls that off. And then in other places, you.
And how interventionist were the band? I mean, how much grief did you get? I mean, Harvey Weinstein famously said you were the only person who's actually survived an entire
survived
movie
the whole
with
film. The only editors to survive a whole film.
Yeah.
Well, I think they might have changed now.
Right. Were they? But was it? I mean,
They were
did
very.
they kind of let you get on with it, or were they constantly coming in and saying no, don't?
Both.
Okay.
Both. They'd let you get on with it, and then you'd hear something from somewhere in the world, from one of them, relating to something which was now however many weeks old, and try to feed that in. I mean, they were hugely trusting, at the same time as very clear about some things that were not going to go in the film and are not going to be seen. They were complicated characters to work with, but they were also pretty wonderful. And it was, I mean, it's a surreal experience. It's a totally surreal experience that is unlikely to ever happen again. So, I mean...
Enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. Roll with it.
Okay, we're going to move on again and just try and keep us to time if we can. So we've come to Una's last clip. We've been kind of in that spirit of kind of art house movies. We're kind of working our way back in time rather than we've inverted the chronology of this particular narrative today. So we're working back. So this, I think I'm right to say, this was your first television drama. First, you know, kind of. This is a film called. It's a while back now. I think probably about 7 years ago now. It's called White Girl, written by the amazing Abby Morgan, directed by Hetty McDonald. Tells the story of a working class family who moved to Bradford, and the girl in the family finds herself as the only white girl in her class, and she then embraces Islam. Somewhat to the consternation, I think, of her own family. So we're going to see it. I'd like to watch this and think about this. I mean, again, if you watch this in relation to The Missing that we saw at the top, and just the way in which, again, I'll talk a bit to Una about the narrative and also kind of subjectivity and objectivity, in that sense, how with editing you can kind of put yourself with one character or another, and you can make those kind of choices. So just bear that in mind when you're watching the clip. So can we run the White Girl clip, please?
Leah!
Get up. Leah, get off that floor.
What's she got on?
It's called an hijab.
Take it off.
Just take it off, okay?
No.
Take it off.
No.
Leah, love. Stop pissing about.
You get up now. It's a fucking wedding, Leah.
Allahu Akbar.
You don't embarrass me here. You take that fucking thing off. You look like a fucking twat.
Please don't.
Leah, you fucking little...
Listen, I bloody warned you about this.
Just
Come
take
on.
it off, Leah. No!
You take it off now.
Get
You
off!
fuck... Right. Don't you fucking dare.
No.
Fucking talk.
No!
Debbie, she's embarrassing us.
So, now interestingly, I mean, this may just be me, but you know, it's interesting. I compared that clip to The Missing, and there are kind of some interesting parallels with it for me. I mean, on the one hand, we find, you know, we're with a kid in a kind of slightly lost in an adult's world, and then we step outside that world, and we get the sound changes dramatically when we end up outside. But this time, instead of being in the dad's head with The Missing, this time we're very much with Leah. Yeah. We're very much with, you know, and so can you just talk a bit about kind of what you wanted to, you know, particularly probably with this, well, and also it's interesting, the wedding itself has a kind of dreamlike quality, slow-mo and kind of, you know, quite, so just talk about what you were looking to do as an editor with that sequence.
Yeah, well, I think anyone who's editing, when you are faced with any whatever the sequence is, even if it's just a simple dining room dinner scene, you do have to think about, well, what is it about, and if the point of view is important. So when Hetty shot that, fortunately she shot the wedding scene with those slow-mos because she actually shot it with dialogue as well. There's a lot more dialogue in the film prior to her exiting the wedding, which we snipped out. So
it's that thing about omission as well.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And just being with this child who did not want to be you. This mother, just a little bit of backstory, the mother has got back with that abusive stepfather. So she absolutely did not want to be at the wedding. So I think it was really important that the way we crafted that scene, we just tried to, as you said, just be in her head, into some of the shots that Hetty framed, say, even in the bathroom, big wide shot, which was very powerful, but we opened with the one through the door so that everything that Hetty and Wojciech Chappelle was the DOP, their framings implicitly favoured the character, but then she also had to shoot some objective point of views just for, you know, the politics of TV, but we did really try and stick in everything that was relevant to the child and just stay in her shoes. So when the father did come in, and in reality, that scene, I mentioned to you, when the father pulled the hijab off, originally he just pulled it off, and we very quickly realised in order to feel the terror that the girl feels because she runs to the next family next door, we extended that moment. So if you ever watch it again, all that, get that fuck, it's all ADR lines that, and we've sort of just chopped up a lot of the footage that we had. And again, with my background in documentary, it's very important for any editor to be a bit of a magpie and just take everything before action, after cut, anything you can find that can just invigorate if you need to.
Just talk a little bit more about that sequence. That's very interesting. So you essentially, in the script, he just pulls
in the
it
script,
off.
he comes over and he just pulls it off her head.
But
and in the performance,
but there was, Hetty had shot other stuff, or you were just kind of finding shots from different takes and kind of.
Yes, we were repeating.
So you
the
were
same
constructing that in the edit as a kind of like as a montage.
As a montage,
really.
yeah.
That kind of didn't really exist. Well,
Correct. It didn't. It
hadn't
wasn't
been
as.
intended
It
to be a
wasn't as
montage,
large.
but you kind of. So you had to kind of go and find bits that weren't really meant to be with one another, but kind of make them feel like they were.
Well, they were all shot at the same time from
Yeah.
different angles. But say, for example, if she had an A camera, the pull-off and B camera, then I used A camera first, then the mother, then back to B camera, as if he's still attacking the child. So I fleshed it out.
Right.
And we had to be very careful, obviously, that he couldn't look too aggressive towards the child, which is obviously a concern for TV drama. But I think we got the right line because he was aggressive enough.
I know Maze is pretty scary enough.
Yeah, he's scary. But I mean, even like when we cut to him through the glass, we deliberately were going for, okay, we're only going to show him like the monster that the child perceives him to be. It was not his story, and we did not try and give any justification to his abuse.
Okay, we've got one more clip, and we're back with Ben for the last clip. This is a film which, again, we're kind of moving backwards in time. This is a film which is, again, from about 7 or 8 years ago. Really remarkable film, directed by Henry Singer, this is a film where John Smithson, who was the exec, brought you. So you weren't on this film from the beginning, is that right? No,
I wasn't.
So at what point did you come into this?
I'm not entirely sure at what point it was in their world, their schedule.
But you came in. There was a.
I came. There was a cut.
There was a cut.
There was a cut that was a good cut. John phoned me up. I'd made a couple of films with Darlow Smithson, which was his company at the time, and he phoned me up and basically said, "There's this film. Feels to him like it could be more than it currently is. Will you have a look at it?" I said no, I'd just had my first child. He said, "Okay, let me send you it." I said, "Don't." He sent it to me. I watched it and I thought, this should be an incredible film. Being a good film isn't enough for this point of view on this subject at that time.
So this is we're going to show a clip in a moment. This tells the story of, I mean, some of you will remember, many of you recall, the kind of probably the most extraordinary image of the many images that came out of 9/11 and a collapse of the World Trade Center towers, which was a photograph of a man, falling man, jumping man, one might call it. I mean, who knows? But photographed taken with him frozen in midair, seconds from dying. And it kind of tells the story behind this and also explores the kind of, in a way it's a film about filmmaking, in a way it's a film about...
Arguably the important thing is, in terms of contextualising it, is up until about this point, there hadn't been any sizable films that were looking at the people that were caught up in 9/11 rather than the bricks and mortar or the politics or the, all the rights and wrongs in that. But actually there's just a load of people living their lives who are in there, and that hadn't really been addressed. And this was a photograph that was taken, and maybe it will be in the clips, I don't know, can't remember. And it was everywhere for about 48 hours or thereabouts, if I remember rightly, and then it totally disappeared, completely disappeared, was airbrushed out. And this was a film trying to explore why that was, what it was to the people, and the kind of story of that photograph as a different prism to look at.
And I think I'm right in saying that actually this is like not one clip, it's two clips, I think, with this kind of with the sort of.
Yeah, apparently.
So you'll see there's a little fade to black in the middle. So this is not a contiguous one single clip. It's actually two clips here, and we'll talk about that. So can we run the clip? Last clip, please.
At 9:58, the South Tower fell, extinguishing in an instant the hopes of hundreds inside. The photographer Richard Drew caught the moment.
I think the camera is sort of a filter for me between
me and what I'm photographing, and I'm only seeing what's coming through my lens, and that helps me sort of separate it, I guess, psychologically.
What Drew didn't realise was that it already captured an image so shocking, so representative of the horror of the day, that it would ignite controversy and anger across the world.
Holy shit! Oh my god!
Numerous people jumping. Numerous people jumping.
There were things that were so big that were falling. And it was terrifying and horrifying to think I didn't recognize the objects I was seeing as people. Maybe that thought was just too horrendous, too horrifying to me.
Others did see what was happening. Lonely 10-second journeys. A very public way of dying.
What did you feel? I mean, you said you had a good cut. So when you looked at it, I mean, it's interesting. You kind of as an editor, coming into something which is sort of someone else's work, but
Yeah.
sort of, what did you? Can you kind of sum up what it was? What was it that you felt was missing from it? I mean, you said it was a good cut, but you felt it was good, but it could be great. What did you? What was
missing? A certain amount of the humanity, of the universal. I mean, it doesn't matter who those... I was going to say it doesn't matter who those people are, but what I mean is it doesn't matter who those people are. They're people, and they're people who have people that love them and surround them, and they have those ripples are there. And I felt very strongly at the time that the subject had been hijacked into politics and it had forgotten the humanity and the universality of that humanity. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, we're people, and we feel, and we hurt, and we love, and we fall out of love, and all that kind of stuff happens. I felt that was what was missing in the film, I guess, was that it was a very strong telling of the story, but it wasn't making me question the world that I was in, which is, I think, what documentaries, when they work, can really do, is just make you, like when you walk out of an art gallery and suddenly the paving stones are all amazing. It can change the way that you see the world that you're living in.
Did you go back with that? Did you go back to basics? Did you go back to the rushes? Did you go back in?
Oh, I went back a lot, and sometimes I ended up in the same place or a similar place. And sometimes I can't remember the phrase that was used not entirely positively for me. I exploded things, and an hour of what was in the original film is nowhere to be seen in that film at all, not a frame of it, not a word of it. So yeah, I very much went back, but when you have, it's not uncommon in documentaries to have two editors. It's not uncommon to take it so far and then become snowblind by it and not maybe able to take it over the edge and what have you. And it's easy to look at a film and go, oh, well, that doesn't quite work. But you've got to respect that somebody else has put a lot of time and energy into it, and they're not idiots, and they've done a fantastic job, and there will be reasons why things have gone the way that they have. Might be from the material, might be from the sofa or the politics of the film, but there's a reason why they've ended up where they are. So you go through and you're respectful of that, but then you also try to bring whatever you can bring.
And again, I mean, it's a very different film from Tsunami, but you are also, again, in in the world of documentary, you're dealing with real people.
Yeah,
you know?
those people falling are people's loved ones. So
That is, I mean, I still find that a really
chilling.
shocking. I mean, was that, did you talk about, I mean, that sort of, because that sequence where, you kind of, I mean, montage and kind of almost like there's, and maybe this is just my imagination, but it feels like almost in that montage the kind of falling sequences just get infinitesimally longer, and it kind of, and you are bracing yourself to
at the
see
beginning
someone
you're
hit
not
the ground,
quite sure
and
what you
actually
see.
they don't. But
There's various of them through the early parts of the film which you don't acknowledge, you don't see as that, because that was the experience of it. And then after a while it dawns on you, and then you see more, and it's more and more clearly that's a person in their last moments. And I think, certainly I found I needed that warming up in order to not look away. And for a long time, that particular sequence was a sequence that everyone would look in the other direction, which means you failed, pointedly failed. And then hopefully it now becomes something which you might be feeling incredibly uncomfortable, but you can't look away, you look at it. And that's the power, and I think what makes it powerful.
Okay. I think we've got about 5 or 10 minutes. Can we get the house lights up? Are we able to take questions? Do we have microphones? Or good, we have all of the above. So I can barely. That's better. Right. I'm going to try and just take 2 or 3 questions at once, because we haven't got and then we'll get Ben. If you can, if your question is specifically for one of them, can you make that clear? Blimey. And if it's for everyone, then you could do. So I'm going to work from the back forward. So chap in the middle, about 2 rows from the back. Yes, you. Thank you. And then we'll come forward and then forward.
Hi, yes, at Ben. You said at one point with the Falling Man film that you kept trying to turn it down. How do you get to a point in your career where, like, because for anyone in here, probably if they were given the opportunity to work on something like that, to be like, nah.
Oh no, I wasn't at that point in my career. At that point, at all. At all. I was an editor for hire, and the film wasn't the film it ended up being at that point. It was just a film that was on this subject, and I was turning it down because I literally got a phone call 3 days after having my first son, and you've got your new little baby. Do you want to make a film about absolutely horrific? No. It's, I mean, it wasn't career based at all. It was absolutely, the truth of that film is that when I knew that I had it, and I managed to negotiate to have a couple of weeks of just looking and working at the material, basically in isolation, thanks to my son, and just saying, I'm not going to go into a cutting room, but you can send it here and I'll have a look and a play with it. And I knew that it was amazing when I found myself coming out of that room in floods of tears. And you kind of think, okay, that's horrible, but it's going really well. And if you can do that to other people, then maybe you have shone a light somewhere that perhaps needs a light shone on it.
So let's take the one in the middle, and then who was it? You? Yeah, great. Okay.
This question probably applies more to the editing of drama and fiction, but are there common mistakes or things that frustrate you that a crew has done on location, a certain way that they filmed something that you could talk about? That, oh, I wish they hadn't done that, or oh, if they just got a shot of this, or anything like that.
Okay, can you hold that thought? Because I'm going to see. Can we take your question as well, and then see?
Yeah, it's for Una. It's not for Ben because he's made me feel too anxious watching that.
Sorry,
I did a good job. It's just about coloration in terms of when it comes to finalising the project. Within the wedding scene, it looked like a Martin Parr photography project.
Yeah.
How involved are you in that? process? That's my question.
Okay, do you want to take that, and then you can both have a chance to vent at how terrible...
No, because I actually have an answer for any would-be directors. There is one thing that is my...
All right, well, let's start with that.
Okay,
then. Go on.
There is one thing that I would urge any director not to do, and that is if there is a scene and they shoot it in compartments. So they cover one half of the scene in one particular way, and then they take the second half and they shoot a new sort of setups for the second half. So as an editor, you don't have the whole scene covered. You only have the first. So when I'm trying to cut something, I'm thinking, well, where's that angle for the second half of that conversation at the dinner table, for example? And I phone the director and he goes, oh, no, I did the first half like that, and the second half is, I would recommend any director do not do that, please, for yours. And colorization, that was a Wojtek, and unfortunately, very often in drama, we're gone by the time the grade takes place. But Wojtek and Hetty did all the grade, but I knew what they were going to do. So, but it only nowadays the demands for the cutting room are such that I track lay, I put temp track, I do VFX, I rezoom, I grade. But at that time, 7 years ago, it wasn't like that.
And do you have any tips and hints for directors, things they shouldn't do?
Ask the next question too quickly. The most amazing thing in any interview is when people are talking and they're on a roll and you as the director have your list of questions that you know you really want to go, and they're saying something and then you think, oh, but I want to go on to these next questions. Don't wait, and you would be amazed at how often that awkward silence turns into the centerpiece of whatever. Because if you've got them in a chair and they're talking to you, they want to talk, and it'll be not your straight down the line questions that produce the really universal human moments, which is...
I mean, just generally, I think, you know, we started this at the top of the session. You know, I said, you know, I'm always going to encourage people who, whatever they want to do in television, wherever they want to end up, whether they want to be DOPs or whether they want to be, you know, if you start in the cutting room, you see very quickly, you see exactly. That's why it's such an interesting place to be, because, you know, wherever you want to end up, because you will see, you know, you watch someone like, you know, putting a sequence together, and very quickly, you know, it becomes clear what is not there that should be there, what, you know, and kind of, you know, and that, and you know, as I say, that you then take that out, you know, in terms of scripting, in terms of shooting, you know, understanding how it's going to come together, understanding the key, you know, what the key shot is, you know, what is this about, you know? I mean, sometimes I've sat as an exec in a cutting room and said, why have we not got a shot of this? You know, we ran out of time, you know. But that's the story. We've got time for a couple more questions on the end of the row here and here and maybe here. Let's try and get 3 more questions in.
Do you have a specific order in which you work in terms of workflow, or does it depend on the specific project? And does the team, like the director and the other people working on the team, do they affect the order in which?
Let's try and take the 3 questions and see if we might get through them quick. Now, where was it? In the middle and then in the second row.
I want to ask you specifically about the process of editing. If you have tips, or what do you follow when you have long hours and you have to edit in a short time?
All right, and let's take one more question. We've got workflow, vast volumes here. Have we got another mic? Just down here in the second row.
Those 2 questions
sorry. Oh, sorry.
My question's for
hijacked.
Una.
Sorry, we will get to you as well. We're going to end up with 4 questions. Go on then.
So, obviously, working with like one storyline, one timeline is a task in itself. With The Missing, you had 2 timelines. How challenging was that, and how were you able to sort of connect those together?
Okay. And I promised this man his question, so can we get a mic to the second row here?
The question is quite similar to the first one. She was asking about the flow. I asked specifically, as editors, I suppose you create a specific style of editing for yourself. How hard is it to implement this style in a project? And if you're, well, this could be a second question, but if you're so passionate about a film, like for example, you did 9/11, how hard is it to continue the style without being personally motivated to edit it slightly differently too. Do you get what I mean?
Think so.
Okay, so we've got workflow and about, and style. We've got how do you deal with vast volumes of material?
Yeah.
And then we have a specific question about the timeline.
2 timelines, which is sort of like the vast material, I think, as well. Just to go in reverse order, this might be more direct to you, but I would say, from myself personally, I wouldn't say that I have a style that I impose on the material. I might have a sensibility, but I think when I look at rushes, if I work with different directors and they shoot in a different way with their DOPs and the script is a different beast, you really have to interact with the material and you find your feet, you find your style. And I definitely wouldn't prescribe. I'd hate to be known as the one who uses no sound for dramatic moments. I think you have to find the material, be organic. A high-pitched noise accompanied. But I think it has to be more organic than that.
Yeah, I think the material normally, I think what you have as an editor is a sensibility, and normally that's the thing that people, directors, producers, or stories approach you because they want a sensibility and a sensitivity, or there's hard journalistic editors, and then there's totally abstract art school kind of editors. People go to you because they want a particular thing normally that they've seen, and then the story dictates the form and the footage dictates the form. Some films, like The Stones, it requires to be completely mashed up and put in a blender and then refolded. It needs that. Something like The Falling Man, that would be disastrous. And but there's a sensibility in both of them which is continuous, and I guess that has to be. I guess that's us.
Okay. We are
workflow.
We do workflow really quickly. Yeah.
Workflows in documentary workflow, you get everything in totally different formats from all over the place, different ages. It's a total chaos, and you don't have it all at the same time. Sometimes you start with one interview. One film I started with a 7-hour interview and nothing else, and by the end of it, it was a chorus of 18 people. So that you can't dictate, and also with that, I think you always kind of bow your hat to the people that are putting it together in the end, and I'd always do that to the post houses that are going to put it together. That's where the really nasty problems come, not with me, who's more interested in just story.
And then, so with Missing, so that film, as I said, I assembled all the present tense on my own, but once we came to the past tense, we actually had a team of Fiona and Danny and myself and Kate. So the script, first of all, was our benchmark, and we did this thing which was like a marathon. When we had finished the shoot, we watched all 8 episodes in a row, and that was incredible because then we had the freedom to actually move scenes around between the episodes. So it became, but we didn't do too much of that because Jack and Harry wrote it in such a way that the timeline of past went in a chronology and the present went in a chronology. So we never ever, until episode 8, we never went back in time. Within it, both times continued through the series in their own way. Does that make sense?
Okay. We're out of time. I'm going to give you both 10 seconds. What's the one thing? Anyone who wants to be an editor, what's your one? You've got 10 seconds each. What's your one piece of advice?
Edit. Don't be afraid of getting it wrong. Don't be afraid of saying you don't know. Don't be afraid of going down dark alleys. You can never jump to the end piece. You have to just go at it and go at it and go at it, and every project and everything will inform the next thing, and hopefully they all align and you find yourself with something that you're really proud of at the end of it, and if you're proud of it, hopefully it plays well to other people.
Yeah, and I'd say if you're editing, make sure that the story is cut so that the plot and the action inform the characters, keep the audience empathizing with their circumstances, keep a clear head, remember things, and just be brave and inventive, and don't be afraid to try things out.
Thank you very much.
There's no wrong.
There is no wrong.
There's no wrong.
That's a great place to end. Thank you to Ben and Una.